Hello everyone, I'm delighted to be joining you today, really to congratulate David on the publication of his book. Of course, David has been a stalwart of Westminster. He has been around for a long time, but of course he's got a great deal of experience, insight and knowledge. He's of course a fellow Essex MP and a great Essex MP. So David, I look forward to receiving my copy of your book, and of course I wish you every success.
Next month, a book which I have written called Eyes and Ears, A Survivor's Guide to Westminster, will be published, part of which covers Brexit. And yes, by inference, everyone will be in the book. Would my right honourable friend agree with me that the last general election was not fought on how political parties might handle the coronavirus pandemic, but was categorically about ensuring that the result of the 2016 referendum was implemented in full? Will my right honourable friend confirm that that is what he intends to see happen?
Prime Minister. I can indeed, Mr. Speaker. I congratulate my right honourable friend on his new book.
And if you were to read his excellent book, Madam Deputy Speaker, Eyes and Ears, probably available in all good bookshops, you would be aware that he is the proud patron of the Conservative Animal Welfare Foundation and has devoted much of his life to campaigning on behalf of our furry friends.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to my virtual book tour event. If you would like to ask me any questions during this premiere, please use the live chat box on the screen and I will do my best to answer your question. If you would like to purchase my book and support one of the 3 charities I'm raising money for with the sales, there are links in the description to Ian Dale's Politicos or Amazon. You can also get the book directly from the publishers, Luath Press, or through your own Member of Parliament, who I'm sure will be more than happy to collect a copy from my office at the House of Commons. I hope you enjoy the evening. Hello everyone. Well, today I'm being interviewed by 2 of my parliamentary colleagues about a book I've written. There we are. I know some cynics think that MPs can't write books. This has not been ghosted. And this is in my own words, it's called Eyes and Ears, A Survivor's Guide to Westminster. It's not really about my full life story because I haven't reached the end of the road yet. It's really given a take on my 38 years in Parliament because, my goodness, it has changed a lot, and it includes also what went on during the Brexit fiasco and also about the pandemic, I meant. Okay, now, viewers, we have Heather Wheeler from Derbyshire and James Wild from Norfolk. Now, I'm trying to think what I could say about those 2 counties. Heather, would you like to tell our audience, please, take as long as you want, all about yourself, my dear?
Right, thank you, David. Well, brilliant that you've brought James and myself together, because what you can do, putting Derbyshire and Norfolk together, is I was born in Norfolk and I'm a Norfolk girl. So it was a great pairing. So we're WW2 all the way through. So I'm South Derbyshire MP, came in 2010, previously been leader of my district council, and I'd been in opposition on the council for 13 years. And in 2007, we won it for the first time ever. It had always been Labour. And previously to that, I'd been on Wandsworth Council down here in London. I worked in the city for 10 years. I'm a chartered insurance broker and worked at Lloyd's, had a wonderful career, and then met a brewery director. And so I gave it all up and moved to the Midlands. And my life just made a different path, but it was always going to be about politics, always about politics. So I'm a very happy MP, and I love my constituency. It's where we live, and couldn't be better.
Now, hang on, Heather. It seems to me as if you had a real job before you became an MP.
Absolutely.
You've had a bit of life's experience.
Yeah, I didn't go to university. I went straight into the city at 18, and we did our professional qualifications by day release, afternoon release, evening classes, that sort of thing. And so took me 4 years to pass my professional exams, and I'm really proud. I'm an ACII, and I'm really proud of that.
Do you support the Canaries?
I have a very sad tale to tell. That I had a canary scarf, and when I went to my infant school, somebody stole it from my peg, and I'm just, you know, in tears. So actually, I'm a West Ham supporter. I mean, obviously Burton Albion, obviously Castle Gresley Rovers, and obviously Derby, but I'm a West Ham supporter.
And Heather, as you know, I was born in West Ham. I'm a lifelong West Ham supporter. So when West Ham played Norwich in a game, I was on the terrace there, and the chant went out, "They can't read, they can't write, but they can drive a tractor." And I don't think, who's that woman who writes the cookery books?
Yes.
Delia
yes.
Smith.
Delia.
And of course, Yvette's husband, Yvette Cooper's husband, was chairman of the club.
Yes.
Anyway, look, James. Now, James, someone told me that you sleep with a member of the cabinet.
That's true.
Only the one?
Fortunately, we are married, so I think that's positively encouraged with the vows we've taken. So yeah, that is true. I'm a season ticket holder for the Canaries, and on Friday night the Canaries played the Linnets, Kings Lynn, my other team. So that was exciting. And I've been on the terraces at Southend, where the Norwich fans sang about Southend, but they weren't calling it a city. It sounded a bit like that.
Now, James, tell us something about your journey before you became an MP.
So I was elected in December 2019. Before that, I was a special advisor in various government departments for quite a long time. I worked for Michael Fallon in the business and energy department, and then had 3 fantastic years working for him in the Ministry of Defence. Then I worked for David Lidington in the Cabinet Office when he was effectively Deputy Prime Minister during some of those Brexit days. And then when Boris became Prime Minister, I was in the Brexit team within Downing Street for 6 months before the election. So I've seen a few things over the years. And before that, I worked in the telecom sector and some other consulting work. So probably a bit more of a political background than Heather's.
Well, in 30 years' time, James, I can't wait to read your kiss and tell. That would be absolutely amazing. And who was your predecessor? I mean, we don't go back to Ralph Howell, do we?
No, he was in North Norfolk, so next door. So it's Henry Bellingham.
Oh, Henry. Oh,
yeah.
Henry, what a fabulous guy. And I'm so jealous you've got Sandringham in your constituency.
Yeah.
And you've got the wonderful railway station, which the Queen uses. And isn't that where the film was shot? Not To Here to Eternity, but Brief Encounters. In a way, on the station, I thought.
Possibly. I'd have to go away and check on that one. That's not one of the factoids I have to hand. But no, it's a great constituency. You've got lovely parts of the coastline. In Kings Lynn itself, there are pockets of deprivation, and skills and wages are lower than the regional average. So there's plenty to focus on. Getting schools attainment is something I'm particularly keen to focus on. So yeah, there are very nice parts, but there's also other bits and challenges to address.
So David, if you don't mind me jumping in, so we lived in Kings Lynn, and my dad, in effect, was the guy that ran the job centre then, and then he got promotion from there down to HQ in London, and so that's why we ended up in Putney, and I was a Putney girl and a Greycoat Hospital girl, and Dad was in HQ for Department for Employment all those years ago. But
I think there's been divine intervention bringing the 3 of us together. Well, there we are, ladies and gentlemen. 2 very different people, but I think we're going to have a very interesting conversation. Now, who would like to go first?
I was going to ask you about the new style of MPs, but I think that's slightly unfair on James. So shall I ask about something else? And then maybe we might morph into that once the conversation has flowed a bit. But to help James and me, because we've all got to get re-elected, what do you think the public actually want from politicians?
Well, I think a bit of consistency, a bit of sincerity, a bit of truth, but I think they want politicians who believe in things. I mean, Heather, for goodness sake, I've been a Conservative all my life. I must have, when I was delivered, woke up as a Conservative. I've worked out why I'm a Conservative. I was born into absolute poverty, but I was fed up with Labour having run the place since Keir Hardie, keep going on about poverty and how bad things were. I wanted something to change all that. And of course, Margaret Thatcher was the person who did it for me, and Winston Churchill before then. So I think that people really do want politicians who believe in things and are sincere. I also think, it may upset some people, they don't just want career politicians. They do not want politicians who, as soon as they are elected, dump the constituency and just want ministerial office, whatever that means. Because once you're going up the greasy pole, there's only one way you're going to go. And it can be pretty traumatic, frankly. And for the life of me, Heather, and this isn't having a go at James, I can't understand why some colleagues don't spend 1, 2, 3 years learning about Parliament. It's not just where the toilets are or the tea room are. Spend time with the clerks, learn about procedure, understand the way we work, honourable, right honourable, etc. But now it seems to me, before people have even been selected as, look, you weren't going to ask me, and now I'm going on about it. It seems to me that even before they've been selected, they want to be Prime Minister. Very, very few people have got the qualities that it takes to be a successful leader, and some of them get the job and they're pretty hopeless at it. So, many are called and very few are chosen. And I think the general public are not to be taken for granted, and they shouldn't be regarded as being naive. And I think that we need politicians who believe in things. I mean, Heather, look at the number of people when we had these fixed lists, and please don't take offence if either of you came from one of these jigged lists, but, manoeuvre someone for the sake of it who's not even a Conservative. Who came up with the idea of open primaries? I don't want a Labour or Liberal person deciding who's going to be chosen as the candidate. I'm not going to name them, but look at the number of people of our colleagues who are elected for one party, and as soon as the going gets tough, they switch to someone else. Sincerity and beliefs. What do you think, James?
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I think there's a bit of a temptation because as a new MP, your mailbox, your virtual mailbox is just incoming fire from people who disagree with you, and you have to hold your nerve in what you believe in when you're in the face of a storm of Twitter or email activists who are sort of actively campaigning with you. And I think that's why getting around the constituency and talking to people so they can see you as a new MP. Because of COVID, fewer people have met me than probably would have done otherwise. Been fortunate to have a profile in local paper and weekly columns and that sort of thing. But there's no substitute for meeting someone, and then you size them up and decide whether you like them or not, and kind of their style. But yeah, I mean, I kind of long-standing Conservative values around opportunity is really why I'm a Conservative. And those you've got to have that anchor to look at all of these issues, and then people know where you're coming from. And also you have to explain to people, you're not there simply to, if they say this is what they think, you have to say that in Parliament. That's not what you're elected for. You're there to represent them, but you're not there just to be a delegate for whoever shouts the loudest. So as a new MP, that's something you have to get used to kind of, and talk to more experienced colleagues about how to kind of do that, and perhaps leave replying to things for a few days. I certainly do that now, having been other colleagues have been caught out quite badly from sort of suddenly getting on the keyboard and sending a reply when, given my jobs that I've done in the past, I know when there's going to be a change coming, shall we say.
Mm.
Now,
But
Joe,
have you, over the years, David, have you sort of mellowed, or are you still as kind of boisterous and in the constituency as perhaps you were when you kind of first won in '83?
that is a very good question. I've mellowed about life because we were daft enough, my wife and I, not to have one child, but have 5. We now regard it as a great blessing if you're childless, although childless people wouldn't see it like that, because we thought they'd get to a certain age and they would leave the nest. Well, they come back and all of that. So my life experiences have definitely mellowed me somewhat. And Heather and James, you see, you haven't seen me how I used to be. So when Labour were in office from 1997 to 2010, I would always be talking about this rotten government. This was when Blair and Brown were running the show. Well, now I leave it up to the new girls and guys to do all that sort of stuff. And also, James, I have to say to you, I wasn't incredibly partisan when I was elected, but Heather, I don't have to tell you that representing a marginal constituency, which Basildon was not once, twice, 3 times, our colleague Jackie Doyle-Price to win Thurrock 4 times. It's incredible. I've seen the pressure she's under. So, James, I went from a seat which was touch and go every time to a seat where royalty came, and for 100 years represented by the Guinness family. So, I mean, they've gone from royalty to me, a shock to the system. So when I came to Southend West, I've always treated it like a marginal. So I used to still have my campaign battle bus going. I'm not going to sing it, vote, vote, vote for David Amos. He's the only man for me. If you want to be true blue and to wear your points of view, then David Amos is the only man for you. And that's been played over and over again. And you name it, Margaret Thatcher, Norman Tebbit, Kenneth Baker, they've all listened to this thing, and Douglas Hurd. But it was something you said, James. If you don't like people, what are you doing the job for? Now, I love animals, and animals are grateful for everything you do, and human beings always aren't. But, you know, if you see human beings as a nuisance, I don't know why you've gone into politics. So I meet people. I'm old-fashioned. I go knocking on the doors. I was standing on a soapbox way before John Major with a megaphone. And all of that. And I think it's part, in fact, Heather and James, I don't know how you've handled the pandemic, but just before this recording, I've been around a couple of schools, socially distanced, even went to a church. So I do quite enjoy getting out and about. And I think people sort of remember those things. So from a constituency point of view, I'm as active as I ever was. But from a chamber point of view, I'm not as belligerent as I was. Because to be frank to both of you, I'm having to defend the government. So it's much easier to attack than it is to defend. Yes. Yeah. Over to you, Heather.
Okay, well, I mean, I agree with you. Having done 13 years in opposition, you can have an awful lot of fun. And then all of a sudden, the decisions are your decisions, whether it's somebody up there making them, but they're still your decisions because we're true blue and that's it. So, I mean, thank you for telling us what you think politicians, what the public want from politicians. Flipping that a little bit, when have you rebelled and what did you rebel on?
Oh, I've rebelled on a fair number of things. You're going to
remember the first time?
Well, including on overseas aid. Not going to tell you who, but one of our colleagues got to me about this issue. but it's tricky. And okay, Heather, you came in when David Cameron became Prime Minister, didn't you?
Yeah.
I was against him making it 0.7%.
Yeah.
But then I began to sort of understand it a bit. So I've rebelled on quite a number of things. I suppose the biggest thing I've rebelled on was Libya.
Yeah.
And any further involvement in this. Now, James, I tell you why I did this. I'm not a military expert. You've only got to look at me to say, you know, if we wanted to be defending, we wouldn't choose David Amess. And we've now got lots of colleagues with military background. But and this isn't against him, it really isn't against him, but when our then leader, Ian, went to number 10 Downing Street and was briefed by Tony Blair about the weapons of mass destruction, I thought, okay, they both know what they're talking about. But something in me was telling me it wasn't a great idea without having an exit plan. So I was in the chamber when we had that momentous debate, and you remember Cook and all the rest of it. And he stood there, this inveterate liar, and said that weapons of mass destruction were directed towards us and would reach us in 10 minutes. So I thought, God, well, I've got to support him. And I did. And I really, really regret doing that, because we brought terrorism to these shores. Okay, we had it with the IRA, but much more quickly than would have been the case. And of course, there wasn't an exit strategy, and it just. So when moving fast forward, when David Cameron got a bit involved, I mean, Tony Blair was the biggest warmonger ever. It wasn't Margaret Thatcher, it was Tony Blair. And I actually stopped that engagement. I think there were about 21 of us who voted. So that would be the biggest rebellion. I'll tell you, I was going to rebel against something, and Richard Ryder was our chief whip. And just before I was going to rebel, he phoned me up and said, David, we'd like to make you a parliamentary private secretary. Now, in those days, and please don't take offence, being a private parliamentary secretary was quite a big job. So I was dazzled by this, and I was private parliamentary secretary to Lord Skelmersdale, sadly dead, Edwina Curry, and Michael Portillo. And I had a great, great time. So that stopped me rebelling on a government order to ban rubbers in schools. So I have rebelled, but if I say to you, James, I think it's all right for someone like me, frankly, to rebel. You know, we've got a big, big majority. And I think it's quite brave for a new, I don't know what you think, Heather, for a newish colleague to rebel, because it can perhaps have implications later if they want some sort of career. And I don't agree with being a serial rebeller. I think it has to be done fairly carefully. Yeah. So I have rebelled on some of the coronavirus restrictions, but I reached a stage where I've also thought, oh, look, none of us know the way this virus is mutating. Yeah. We've got to be careful. So yeah, that's sort of the way I played it. James.
Yeah, do you remember, interestingly enough, I scribbled down the same question, because it's something that I'd voted, well, you sometimes get these messages saying the Chief Whip has been asked how he's voting on the sort of House business, which was about the independent complaints process. And I didn't think it was right for those allegations to be debated on the floor of the House. So I voted the opposite way to the way that the gentle encouragement was for. But other ways, what I say to my constituents is, because sometimes they sort of say, why didn't you rebel on that? And I point out that on other issues where I have had concerns, like early release and things, I've had conversations with ministers, and then enough colleagues have done that they've then been dropped and not brought forward. Yeah. But if you're constantly rebelling against the party, you're probably in the wrong party, I would suspect.
And James, if I could just interrupt you for a minute, a moment. I don't know if Heather feels the same way. When I first started, there was no such thing as the internet. people wrote letters. They took 3 or 4 days to get to you. So there wasn't this sort of pressure. Fast forwarding it now with our new colleagues, you get 50 or 60 campaign emails about the health bill, the social care bill. And I imagine this is putting a bit of pressure on more inexperienced colleagues. I don't know. But I do worry about policy just being driven by 38 degrees and these endless campaign issues, really. So I think you're right to be cautious what you rebel on and not immediately take notice of the number of emails you get protesting about things.
No, that's absolutely spot on. And obviously, if there's any more assistance any of the 2019ers need, then let's share around some arms around the shoulders and see how we can help.
And Heather, when you started, I know James did you have an induction course?
We did have sort of like a morning session a day for the first week, and we didn't have any offices. We were given a new metal locker, which was temporary. And what they did was, which was really clever, they emptied out the committee rooms and rejigged those. So we were hot desking in there. And what was really clever was that my committee room 16 gang, we formed a dining club. So since 2010, we've been having committee room 16 dinners. I mean, just go for a curry or a pizza or whatever. Yeah. But it's been really good because we're really good chums. And this place, you need mates.
Oh, you absolutely do need support. And, over the years, I've known colleagues commit suicide, all sorts of dreadful things, have financial difficulties, and you need to share them. Did you have an induction course, James, or you didn't need one, really, I suppose?
No, I did very, very much did. Although I'd done jobs in departments, it's a different role. That's why I was keen to do it and do it in Norfolk, because it offered something different. And the opportunity to represent the area that I grew up is a great privilege. So we had, a bit similar to Heather, really. I think we had sort of most days for the first week, because we had the urgency to get the Brexit legislation through. We all sort of had to come in on the Friday and Saturday to get passes, and then basically had 3 or 4 days of induction, where turning up on time was a lesson that had to be instilled into few new colleagues. But that was very helpful, and really practical stuff about getting into the nitty gritty of how to respond to constituency correspondence and where to direct things, and the kind of casework things which I hadn't really been exposed to before, as well as the points about, you need to, there's support there. And I think the system now is probably a bit different to it was perhaps when you first came into the house, in terms of support and things that are there. But I'm quite interested in...
no such thing as an induction course.
No.
I had long hair. A Labour chap looked at me and asked me, a Conservative chap looked at me and said, could he pair with me? I said, I'm Conservative. There was no induction. You learn on the job, but someone we were much more. The big difference, Heather and James, is that we worked 5 days a week in the building. We started at 2 PM's questions every Tuesday and Thursday for 15 minutes. Far better than PM's questions now, which is an absolute lot of old rubbish. Wasted time, the whole thing. Much better to have it 15 minutes on a Tuesday and Thursday. And then we had real drama. The chamber was always packed. And we were there until 2, 3, 4 in the morning. And we weren't drinking ourselves silly, but some of us were, but anyway, most of us weren't. And we really got to know each other. Well, because of Blair bringing in the guillotine and all this, it's meant we're doing less and less and less. We hardly know each other, frankly. And it's much more cliquey than it was, really. It's so I do think, James, I mean, look, you're not part of the Red Wall, are you?
No.
True blue seat.
Some of my best friends are.
Can't we give them elocution lessons?
No, we want them to win again. We don't mind them reading it.
I mean, listen to some of them. I think there's competition as who's had the more impoverished upbringing. Really.
You're only jealous because that's how you started this conversation, David. Come on, come on.
And I just think it's so. And of course, Labour don't like it, do they?
No.
They do not like anyone who's got a working class background.
Because they're a bit short in that department, love. That's why.
Yeah. And look, I really, I know you're supposed to be asking me the questions, but I want to ask you both something. Restoration and renewal. Where do you both stand on that? Okay.
I think the idea of us moving out of the building, the old building, is outrageous. I think that the amounts of money involved are just unbelievably eye-watering. I really think that we should get rid of the 3 weeks, 2 weeks, September, and let the builders start from the 24th of July and run through to the, whatever it is, 15th of October, and get that done. And they could get so much more done. And the final thing, well, two final things, whatever we finish with, this isn't going to be a Walt Disney theme park. It's a place of business. Never, ever. I mean, I feel sorry for the new kids, because there's a real chance, maybe after the next election, the next lot that get elected in will not have actually set foot in the place. Outrageous, absolutely outrageous. And my final thing is, we've got to keep the confrontation, us and them, not go for the horseshoe. Dreadful, dreadful idea. So apart from that, James, what do you think?
So what I think is, well, I think we need it's an urgent need of modernisation, and what we can't have is the place burning down, because I mean there are fire marshals walking around this building 24/7. I'm currently in a fairly small cubbyhole called my office. It's not a great place to work. So we've got to sort out the chamber and the plumbing and the rest of it. If we can do it in a way where our house stays in, maybe moves up the corridor, then great. But all the projections I've seen is that adds years to the timetable and adds some bigger figures to the already big figures that are there. So, but we need to make a decision and get on with this one way or another, because it's been talked about for so long, and we really can't have a Notre Dame style episode here. If we do, then people won't be saying, oh, well, you were good to try and bear down the costs, or say, why the hell didn't you do something about it when you could have done? So, but a lot of my colleagues are very passionate for the reasons you say about not wanting to, having just been elected, no one wants to not be in the chamber in the historic Palace of Westminster.
This is absolutely fascinating, because I do get the impression that since Lindsay's been the speaker, there has been a rethink about all this. I mean, James, I'm the only person left in Parliament Street from when it first opened. And as a newly elected MP, you didn't have an office. Eventually, I was sent to Abbey Gardens. There was 4 of us in the room. And one of the MPs, I won't tell you who, he never actually appeared at his desk. He lost his seat at the next election, never appeared. And I don't know if either of you would have heard of an MP called Harry Greenaway, but Harry Greenaway had an office in 1 Parliament Street, in Abbey Gardens, which he said, look, David, there's a cloakroom there, ask them to convert it into your office. And that's what I did. And fast forward in it, 1 Parliament Street was the first new office. I love it. Derek Conway, who was much bolder than I was, said, right, we won't wait for the, because you didn't have a whip allocate the rooms then, this very fearsome lady from the Sergeant at Arms room, he said, we're not going to wait for her to allocate the room, we'll just occupy the rooms. I said, Derek, do you think we should? Well, we did. I meekly allowed myself to be pushed to a smaller room. He stood his ground. But the room I've got now, which is fabulous, was Anne Widdicombe's. And Mark Francois was the accommodation whip. And he and Anne got together and they said, David, you are going to have that room. So Anne, it was very austere. She never had the balcony doors open. She only had a desk in there. If you come into my room overlooking Westminster Square, it's full of old tut. I've got the balcony doors open and I appear on the balcony every morning at 10 a.m. to give everyone a blessing. But as you can see, James, I sort of love the whole thing. And the thrill of those green benches, I want everyone else to enjoy. You're absolutely right about the fire risks. I've been up to the top of Big Ben because I wasn't convinced about that. All the water was coming through. Great job restoring that. I've been down to the Bowsea, all the dodgy electric. So I agree with all that, James. But the idea that we were going to move out, Heather, with the security cordon round us.
Yeah.
I was there when 79 Whitehall opened, when we moved from Elephant and Castle, which used to be social security and health, into that building. It's absolutely ridiculous. And I think given the pandemic, it's crazy to keep spending money on it. But I'm going to shut up. Who would like to ask the next question?
Can I ask you about, you obviously there during the heady days of Mrs. Thatcher and the 80s and the really big arguments and big policy divides and a bit more of an ideological time in some ways. Just be interested in your take on some of the characters involved in that. You've mentioned Norman Tebbit and others, and kind of who you sort of admire or most respected from that period.
Yeah, thank you, Jay. Look, I'm not going to talk about the present administration because that would be quite wrong. But head and shoulders above all other prime ministers will be Margaret Thatcher. She was the most extraordinary politician nationally and internationally I've ever met. And that includes, well, I've only just met American presidents, but I met Mikhail Gorbachev and he was pretty good as well in every sense. But there was something quite unique about Margaret, her force of personality. I mean, if we chaps, James, allowed us just like spitting images to be vegetables, then that was our fault. She actually liked people to stand up to her. But she changed our country and she changed the world. And when she went through a division lobby, you didn't feel, oh, there's the Prime Minister looking for friends. It was like this magnetic personality and she was absolutely brilliant. I owe her everything because I wouldn't have won that seat in 1983 if it hadn't been her. And I wouldn't have held on in 1992, the only time that I became famous for 2 seconds when she came to Basildon, because of her and, you know, the lovely way she campaigned for me. So she's head and shoulders above everyone else. But if I mention another character, now Enoch Powell has had his name besmirched because of racism and all of that. But all I can tell you is he was quite extraordinary. His office was the House of Commons Library. And when his name came up on the Annunciator, because remember, Heather and James, our proceedings weren't televised. You could get I mean, my maiden speech was done on an old-fashioned tape recorder. And when his name went up on the Annunciator, everyone would pour in on both sides. He got a double first in classics, and he was one of the best orators I've ever heard. So he had charisma. I think he slightly lost his way when he became an Irish MP, but up until then, an extraordinary character. And on the Labour side, Michael Foot. Now, Michael Foot would just be remembered for wearing the donkey jacket at the Cenotaph, etc. My God, he was a wonderful orator, an absolutely wonderful orator. And Shirley Williams and Dennis Healy and, who was the chap who was the youngest foreign secretary who started he's in the House of Lords with your wife now, one of the Gang of Four.
David Owen.
Yeah. Extraordinary characters. But on our side, look, although James and Heather, I think we're all on the same side as far as Brexit is concerned, but Michael Heseltine was a quite extraordinary parliamentarian. And I know who can command the House and who can't command it. With the pandemic, No one commands a house. We're just going to have to see how it works. But Michael Heseltine, he wasn't only a star performer at our party conferences. And our party conferences now are a complete and utter waste of time. Why do you have to go to Manchester and Birmingham to lobby people? You can do it in London. No policies are made. It's just ridiculous. Do the whole thing in a weekend. All the razzmatazz has gone. But when Michael Heseltine was addressed in the party conference, absolutely fabulous. And, you know, I was there when the tension was between him and Leon Britton over the Western helicopters and all things like that. And of course, trying to modernise things a bit and think about the Blair years and all of that. And some of the characters, I mean, Blair did dominate the House of Commons. There's no doubt about that. But hang on, there were 400 of them. There were only 164 Conservatives left by the time he finished. But I was there with the tensions with Mo Molam saying that she was treated like the tea lady in number 10 Downing Street. But I do think, James, that the skills that were needed as an MP have changed completely. It's now very much physically how you look. So if someone looks at me as I speak, my mouth goes up at one side, my voice grates on people. Well, now it's how you look and how you do these little sound bites. It's not about having big public meetings and bang, 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 and all of that. So I think the characters are slightly different. I mean, look, can you imagine being an MP with Cyril Smith? I mean, when Cyril Smith came into the chamber, we couldn't really get into the pew, you know, had to sort of get in sideways. You know, Ron Brown, I was there behind Michael Portillo when he got hold of the mace and sort of, it was hilarious. There's some Coptic Jews in the public gallery, and when he got hold of the mace, they thought that he was tossing the Khyber. Just extraordinary. So, I mean, I could go on and on about the characters. And I would say we've had some absolutely extraordinary people. And to see John Wakeham come into the chamber after, you know, what happened to Roberta, his wife, and to see him sort of just get to the bar of the House, and a Liberal lady called Patsy Carton, who came in, I think, the very last day before she died. You know, I've seen all different things like that to sign some extraordinary scenes. And I do think, James, we have got many characters among our number now. I'm just learning about them. I'm just reading about them on Guido. And I think in time, perhaps they will emerge, and, you know, whoever decides to do a book later will talk about them. But it's changed a lot.
Just on that characters bit, a part of the book that I did enjoy, Ole, was where you listed the conviction politicians, the careerists, the whipsnarks, the sanctimonious, the best friends, the good guys and girls, the nasty ones. But you didn't name any names. That's why I left us disappointed. So maybe you have to have a chat offline. You can.
Well, look, James, Alan Duncan has done this book, which obviously dishes the dirt on everyone. I'm only halfway through the career, so, you know, I've still got to be with everyone. So do I really want to tell it like it is? And also, frankly, folks, I don't want to be hurtful about people at the moment, and it's very, very tough and very, very cruel. I could see us now reading about my descriptions of people thinking, now which section do I fall into? Have I got convictions? But oh my God, some people are so two-faced. And something that I think is awful, there we are, which we never used to have iPhones, and we have an MP's WhatsApp. Yeah. Now, who goes on the MP's WhatsApp and releases private conversation?
Outrageous. Absolutely outrageous.
And sits with them, having coffee and tea in Portcullis House, dishing the dirt on people, or going to the 1922, which, I mean, is a pale shadow of what it used to be, but going to the 22 and tweeting about the things which are being said. that is neither honourable or clever, frankly, and I don't think they're true Conservatives. So yeah, it's sort of changed a lot. I mean, Norma Tebbit, by the way, was fantastic. Wonderful. And I know he became a bit chippy. Well, he's still going strong now. He became a bit chippy at the end. But, you know, if the woman he loved had been destroyed and paralysed by the Irish Republican Army, and you think now the issues in Ireland, I don't think I could forgive and forget. And he was marvellous. So, yeah, I have typecast colleagues, James, but you're one of the good guys, okay?
Oh, yeah.
If you're thinking about one of the dodgier ones.
I think we're more scared of his wife, David, aren't we?
Yeah.
Just by the by, David, I mean, you've had this brilliant career with all these PPSs and Edwina Curry, my South Derbyshire seat before, and then all that time with Michael Portillo and going with different departments with Michael, because that just hardly happens now.
No.
How come you didn't go into the whip's office?
I would imagine they must have took a collective view that I was too thick, actually, to be given any responsibility. Well, I mean, James is listening to this, because I'm sure if you don't get office, you see. Now, look, James, throughout the whole of my life up till now, I've never found it easy to be a creep or a crawler. And sucking up to people isn't me. And if you want to get on, you read out these ridiculous speeches defending the indefensible. You're quoted and say, I couldn't do it. I just couldn't live with myself. So one stage, going way back, I was a favourite to become a health minister. But I think someone said sort of, I don't think Dave is playing the right guy. I think they possibly, I don't know, I think in the whip's office, Heather, given that before I became an MP, I was in recruitment, I've interviewed hundreds and thousands of people, including one rather famous person, but I'm not going to tell you who. You'd be shocked trying to get a job, but I don't do that to people. So interviewing people, you sort of get a good feel of it. And I could have helped people in the whip's office, but I'm not being nasty, Heather. The whip's office gradually changed character completely, because when I started, it was full of military people, organised people. They didn't use violence against colleagues, but they were quite sharp. Now, and look, I hope no one's going to take offence at it, it seems to be just like a stepping stone to go on to something else. And I think in the whip's office, you need to say, Prime Minister, I do not think this is a good idea. Have you thought about it? And I think also with all these mental health problems, you need to give a lot more support to colleagues, really, than seems to be at the... But, I mean, James, are you aware, and I don't mind saying this to all our viewers, but I don't even know, ladies and gentlemen, what a scandal is these days. I mean, if you were found in bed with a horse, would it be a scandal? I suppose not. You know, I mean... who
paid for the horse?
You know, a scandal, for goodness sake. But... whips used to look out for people, and when something unfortunate happened, they'd give that support. So no one ever went bankrupt in financial difficulties, and we used to look after each other. I mean, look at my former colleague, Harvey Proctor, for Billericay, who was destroyed for something sexual, which today is quite fashionable. And it was wonderful that colleagues who had a bit of money got together, set him up in business with the shirt shop. I don't think any of that happens now, you see. And it does worry me. Well, perhaps, okay, right. Offline, I want to hear about this, Heather. Okay, but it slightly worries me that when I hear one or two of our newer colleagues, James, getting into the doo-doos, doing things which were regrettable, well, surely something has been said in their ears. So look, Heather, I just wasn't seen as being up to it.
Well, don't you think maybe as you know, the next 30 odd years of your career, you could be the alma mater, the arm round the shoulder, and the super uncle.
Well, thank you for that, Heather. Like Alec Douglas-Hume, could I aspire to be in number 10 Downing Street? But you see, James and Heather, I don't know if you're aware, because we do know how ambitious, and I don't mean this nastily, James, we do know that there's a lot of competition between every new intake. And what Margaret used to do, and she didn't think number 10 was my gift, it was shared out, not with barbecues and all that, but you went there 2 or 3 times for a very nice do. She would always have the reshuffles. And by the way, Heather, you were right about the recesses, because the reason we had the long recesses is because they used to repair the building. And it's been opening it to the general public, it's become more and more damaged. She would always have the reshuffles the week we were breaking up. So the unpleasantness and the disappointment didn't show itself as well. And you were always sort of ticked off. So these reshuffles are being done in another way. Now, we're sort of coming towards the end before we talk about charities. So James, one last question. I could talk about football. I can talk about how to win Formula One, you know, put out your main rival out of contention. Absolutely brilliant.
Well, the one that people will be familiar with is obviously your campaign for a city.
Yay!
When are you gonna win that one? And how can we all help you?
Oh, look. Oh dear, how truthful am I going to be about this? Yeah, okay, I am going to say this. The council, Southend Council, is not at the moment run by the Conservative Party. It's a coalition of 5 different parties. We're too short. And at the moment, I think behind the scenes, the leader is behind city status. It's a no-brainer, but I'm waiting to know what they are going to do. So it's all a bit tricky at the moment. And on a serious note, James, I can always remember Yvette when she was a local government minister and Labour in power. She came off the train and she said, David, just been to Southend, lovely people, but they're not ambitious. I mean, if you could walk on water, which we do with the longest pier in the world, that would mean you should become a city. If you had the Thames Estuary and all of that washing up and down, and we got so much. Well, when we had the 2012 Olympic Games, the team behind the Flame coming to the area said the Southend welcome was the best because we had a choir all along the river's edge singing together. Absolutely marvellous. So James, I'm going to hold, I said I wasn't going to talk about the present administration, I'm going to hold the occupant of number 10 Downing Street to his word. Soon after he became Prime Minister, he looked round at me when I asked him, he said, yes, Southend will become a city and Labour will be behind it. So I think just sort of behind the scenes, James, anything that you could do, because we do need investment and it would mean so much for people. We've been overlooked for years and years and years, but thank you for mentioning it. I used to be the Basildon Bore, now I'm the Southend City Bore.
Well, we're all behind you, David. We really are. I don't know whether that means that you have to build a cathedral or one of your magnificent churches in Southend becomes a cathedral, because that's what happened with Derby. So
right, St Mary's Church, Prittlewell, is, although the setting it's in, because it's become more urban round it, a little bit like St Paul's Cathedral, it's a magnificent church.
Brilliant.
Bell ringers is absolutely perfect for it. Oh, we tick every single box to become a city.
Brilliant. Well, talking of ticking boxes then, would you like to tell us about the 3 charities that you're so involved with, that the money from this book, this well-selling book, get it at all good stops and, you know, the other places online. So tell us about the 3 charities, David, please.
Now, Heather, I'd never heard of endometriosis until a constituent came to see me called Carla Cressy, and she said, David, I've got endometriosis. Do you realise 1.5 million ladies suffer from it? And then she described what happens to people with endometriosis, and it was heartbreaking. So I've gone on to support that particular charity. I'm proud to say that we've actually got it in the government's health plan. Yeah. And I'm really, really pleased about that. And James, we chaps aren't so good at looking out for ourselves from a health point of view. So a chap called Paul Sayer came to me. He was suffering from prostate cancer, and as a result of gene therapy, he's been cured. So that's why I'm supporting him. And Heather and James, you both have constituents with learning difficulties. So through a wonderful guy called David Stanley, and his wife is a Salvationist, both senior teachers at a secondary school, he, through the power of music, has transformed the lives of individuals with learning difficulties. Now, Heather particularly, you know only too well how worried families can be when they're no longer around. Who's going to look after my child? And when I first became an MP, James, to be taken to South Ockendon and see people in straitjackets and all of that was a shocker. Through the power of music, it doesn't matter how disabled, disadvantaged these people are, their lives have been transformed. We played at the London Palladium. I did my Bruce Forsyth act. We went on to the Royal Albert Hall. We played there, and Penny Mordaunt, bless her heart, sat in a box. She was Minister for Disabled, watching it all. And if it hadn't been for the pandemic, we would have crossed the ocean and we would have played on Broadway in Carnegie Hall. So all that is going to happen. And thank you both. Look, you have been fabulous. Haven't they, viewers? I think we should sort of, well, I'm going to join you in applause.
And to you. And
if I could say, Heather, first, look, you're a wonderful lady, a real friend. Your star is still in the ascendancy, as far as I'm concerned. Who knows what the future will hold for you? James, you come with a remarkable background. A truly remarkable background. And I think you very much are our future. I mean, you've got years and years ahead of you. And I think given your unique circumstances, being married to someone who's holding high office, you know, when I first started, the only female member of the cabinet was Baroness Young, Leader of the House of Lords, the only one we ever had. And I think you've got that perspective, and given that you've helped us in government departments, and thank you for getting Brexit done. I mean, my goodness, when I think of the fiasco over that, so that's wonderful. You are our future. You're 2 first-class constituency MPs. And I also think, Heather, if anyone wants a bit of advice, I hope James will, signpost them to yourself. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for viewing this podcast. Please go out and buy the book, Eyes and Ears, A Survivor's Guide to Westminster. All the royalties go to charity. Goodbye, everyone. This is my journey so far, where I was born, where I became a councillor, when I was first elected to Parliament, and where I am now the Member of Parliament for. enjoy my journey. I hope you enjoy reading my book, Eyes and Ears, A Survivor's Guide to Westminster.